All right, here we are for Inner Sanctum. This is the third week we're doing this.
Yeah, we're on a roll.
We are. I feel very good about Inner Sanctum right now, but I feel very good about the new year in general.
Yeah. Well, I think I like that we picked Thursday to record these as well.
Yeah,
It's
definitely.
Jupiter's day, and things seem to be like leveling out for you, for us both. I think my Jupiter is in Virgo also.
Okay.
So that's kind of the balance, the leveling out, the kind of affable
Yeah,
sign as well.
I know we generally like keep communication stuff on Wednesday,
We do.
Mercury Day.
Yeah.
However, this doesn't feel like communication to me so much as this feels like it is communicative, and we are communicating with
Indeed.
both you and each other. However, I don't know, I just feel like it feels a little bit opulent to be doing a video podcast. It feels Jupiterian in that way. Like, who does video blogging? Well, like celebrity occultists, I guess. And that's the kind of vibe that I live in when I do these.
I see. So but what if it's opulent because we chose Jupiter's day?
Yeah,
what
I know,
if like
right?
if we did it on a Monday, it would be like a chore.
It would be very lunar. Yeah.
There would be a lot of crying.
A lot of reflection, a lot of like, yeah. I don't know. I think it feels right on Jupiter. I think it feels right on Thursday. And it's a nice way. When I was in a corporate environment, Thursdays were like the last real day. Yes, Friday exists and you have to be there, but like no one gave 100% on Friday.
No.
So
I remember that as well.
This feels like a nice kind of like lead into that for me. Like Fridays for us can be very busy, but I think for the general like working audience of people, the people who have mundane like 9 to 5s, that is,
I always liked Thursday.
I think releasing it on Friday is nice because then like no one who's actually working is really working that hard anyway on Friday. Hopefully. At least that's my idea. I don't know. This is
you're in that kind of industry where you don't have to work too hard on a Friday.
Right. And if you are working really hard and you're listening to us or watching us, thank you. And if you're not working really hard and you just have your feet up and you're relaxing, good for you. Yeah.
I don't think we meant to talk initially about planetary days and scheduling, but do you want to talk about it now?
Yeah, you know what? We should, because we're talking about, or at least we have been talking about, like our new year kind of goals. We've been going over the last year, seeing what things worked, what things didn't. If you're reading our Substack, I'm sure you've seen there's a lot of reflective posts about this is changing, this is staying the same.
It's a little more interesting than that. I love that though. But this new year, that calendar new year that started January 1st, this is 2023. It really blew past for us. It really blew by. We were sick the week before, and we barely had time for any sort of like New Year's rituals or getting prepared to move into a new space.
Yes.
But the kind of plus side on that is we do follow the planets. So we had another chance with the Lunar New Year. Right.
And the Lunar New Year is something that
we didn't always celebrate.
We didn't always celebrate it. And I actually didn't know how valuable it was. And this sounds ridiculous, but outside of like a traditional kind of like Chinese New Year, like that's the American kind of interface with that is like, like problematically, I guess you could say, like I have relatives who like would order Chinese food and do like Chinese New Year in the middle of January.
I don't think a lot of people do that.
Yeah, I don't know how. I don't know about that.
Those things, like we both kind of grew up in remote locations in the country. So we didn't have culture. No, I'm just kidding.
No, we had
a very
culture.
Specific, more insular culture.
A very insular
and
culture.
Now that we are less in the country,
right,
and go more places and
talk with
read more things and basically have totally different lives.
Right, but
we've been exposed to these things.
And I say that because I kind of took a step back from like that because it wasn't part of my cultural narrative. Like growing up, it's New Year on January 1st, and then this is like some kind of like excuse to get Chinese food and maybe have a little party.
Do you need an excuse
I don't.
for either of those things?
I wish we didn't, but I think a lot of people do need excuses to let themselves
Yeah.
have fun.
That's
That's
true.
another conversation.
That's, well, yeah.
However, this year was the first year that I looked at it as like, yes, it's the year of the rabbit, and there are like genuine like cultural celebrations out of like Asian regions for this new year. But there's also like it is the lunar new year, right? Like the lunar calendar is now moving forward. And as someone who's been working really hard over the past year to align myself with the planets, wow, this new year really felt different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we actually tried to like properly observe it. We have been for the past few years, but I think it was more, honestly, we've been pivoting our attention to the planets a lot more this past year.
That's really it. Like this year has been maybe the year of integration of magical praxis with my actual working life. And that sounds strange considering our working life has always been in magic, but there's always been that part of magic that is separate from my spiritual experience. We'll put it that way. So like, I say that like it's such a goofy thing, my spiritual experience.
I mean, yeah.
But there is a, so even though like we were doing like all sorts of magical things for the business, they were always kind of firmly couched in business world for me. And then there was this separate world.
You were like trying to recreate your corporate lifestyle.
Yes, that's the way to say it.
Yes. Like your own business, which makes sense because it's hard to run your own business and you don't really know exactly what things to bring into, what things to take out of. Because your experience has been, you've had some corporate experience, you've had some school experience to look back from, but they were all like organized by institutions that were not you. Yes, exactly. And they don't, I think this is a very Protestant thing to be like, we have we keep uncovering it. I know. We have like our God time, and then we have our mundane lifetime, where we go and we work and we do all our stuff. Church on Sunday morning, and when someone gets sick, praying about it. Like, I think those are the two, like, I don't think you see to the same level within magical praxis that kind of distinction is what I'm saying. Okay. And so for like the spiritual and mundane. Yeah. And so for the new year and like where I'm finding myself right now in terms of magical work, it's the distinctions aren't really there. Like I'm enchanting for the business at the same time I'm doing enchantments for me. I'm doing planetary hours and planetary observation, not because, oh, this is distinctly a unique spiritual practice, which it is, but it's also a like direct benefit to the day. To the day. Yeah, it's the wholeness. It's a holistic approach to this work. Yeah. I mean, we've been doing this for several years now, and I think we finally found patterns that will work, not just in business life, but in like running a household and things like that. Yeah, that's what I'm getting at when I was talking about the new year a little bit, was this idea like before, and this year is a perfect example because in the past, New year, new you, January 2nd, like January 1st, you're too hungover to do anything. And January 2nd, depends. Yeah. You are then like saying that you're going to be, you know, going to the gym, or this is the year we get out of debt or whatever. And then you feel like trash and you don't really, I think a lot of people have trouble doing those things. And so this year, yes, we were sick over like over like Yule and Christmas and all those things. But New Year, we felt better by. The issue for me and what really stuck out was this New Year, we like sat down and said, yes, this is January 1st, but we are not yet in a space of movement. We are still in like deep hibernation, and we will wait until we feel motivated to move forward. And it literally was like January 18th, January 21st, January 22nd, that I really began to feel that upward momentum of like, now we're moving. Sure. And then literally the 23rd and 24th, where it was like inspiration. We know what we're doing with our lives. We have all these plans. Let's go. And now I feel that. Like now I'm like ready to go. Yeah.
But it coincides with that Lunar New Year.
You're just a little planet.
I mean, maybe.
Yeah.
What am I orbiting then?
I am attracted to you.
We're orbiting each other. I love it. And the cats. The cats are like our moons.
Okay. Yeah. That feels that way.
It does.
Honestly. Especially during food times, which is all the time.
Yeah.
In their opinion. But yeah, so we did kind of pay more attention to astrology and seasons as well, paying attention to the Earth season, where we are, it's winter, and paying attention to the slowness of that. And even though the sun is growing longer, the days are growing longer, the sun's coming back, it still is feeling, still feeling very cold, very slow. But you're saying we're starting to break out of that. We had the Lunar New Year, so we're actually in a new, like, more planetary year. And we've moved into what, Aquarius? And Mercury is direct. And what else? There was another thing I was thinking of.
I don't know.
Imbolc is coming up.
Oh, yeah.
So we're looking at the wheel of the year as well. And this reflects on, like, how we act in the world and how the world acts around us. And so I think it was helpful to kind of have that in perspective this January. When things were they're a little bit different. People, it was kind of hard to get in touch with people. Things were a little slower. People are coming out of their holidays.
Well, it's all these things compounding.
Recognizing the season that you're personally in and the cycle of that.
Right. And it helps then to feel like, well, it helps you then when things don't feel like they're going exactly according to plan or whatever, to look at, and I feel this especially as a business owner, to look at the natural ebbs and flows of growth. Like, there are going to be seasons and cycles where you make a lot of money, and then there's going to be seasons and cycles where you're not feeling like you can sell all these things, or you can't do, you're not getting the signups you want, or it's a little bit slower. And taking the pressure off to be like, this is a problem that needs to be fixed, to this is an opportunity for something else. And sometimes that's like reflection. And that's what we've been doing a lot of over December and January, has been this like dark, comfy, cozy, sometimes very frustrating reflection period of what do we want to continue doing? Like, what do we bring into the new year? Which is literally like what the planets are doing, literally what the seasons, the wheel of the year is doing.
There's movement, even if it feels like there's stagnation. And I think that you're completely right. It's good to keep it in perspective that you cannot always have the floodgates open for everything.
No, and like that doesn't make sense.
Or maybe there's a season in your life where that happens, but it's a season.
Well, yeah, and if you're doing magical work, part of what you're doing, I think, is like energy work. I mean, that's what yoga is. That's what like Tantra is. That's what like even the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram, like that is energy movement and moving, like it's almost like a gate or an aperture to do like the lesser banishing at night and the lesser summoning in the morning. Once you fall into those patterns, to me anyway, suddenly it makes a lot more sense that like there are times where the gates are open and times where the gates are closed and times where things are, slow or very fast. And you wouldn't want the gates always open in the same way that you wouldn't want the gates always closed. And we know that with like closed. We know that when there's something that feels like it's closed off.
When we're asking for something.
Yeah, and we're like, where is it? Why isn't it here? Why isn't this coming? Why do I feel like I'm in lack? Why do I feel like XYZ?
Yeah.
We know how stupid it is to feel like, we know how dumb it would be if the gates were always closed. But for some reason, we think it would be smarter or not as stupid if the gates were always open. And I think that's just the other polarity.
Yes, if we look at things as polarities, because there are lots of questions when it comes to looking at gates and things like that, like how steady is the flow, what's coming in, what's going out, do you have control over those doors? And all those things are, you know, maybe yes, if you're a magician.
Yeah.
But also, you know, you're working with the world, you're working with spirits, you're working with entities, possibly.
Yeah, you're working with the wills of other people.
Yeah.
Like that is.
So there is kind of a like woo way, go with the flow.
I think
Also,
so, right?
I think there's a balance there. Like as magicians, it's good to like push forward your will.
Well,
You know?
it's good to take advantage, and I guess this is a very like planetary magic way of looking at things, but I feel like it's the magician is most successful when they are allowing naturally occurring moments or naturally occurring seasons of like growth or power or whatever. I'm thinking of like planetary days where it's like great to do magical workings. And instead of pushing like against the gates to open them, just being there when the gates open so that you know your intent, your will, your magical working is moving through that gate with as much power and lack of obstacle as possible.
Yeah.
Like standing in front of the closed gate and hurling magic at it, I don't know if that works really. I know it doesn't work as well, but I don't even know if it really works if the gates are closed to begin with.
Yeah. Yeah. How much power do you have with the gates? But yeah, I was saying about it's good to push forward your will, but it's also good to kind of go with the flow when you cannot actually shift things.
Yeah, exactly.
So there is balance there.
Well, I think about it too, like in regards to eclipses, like the historically correct magical opinion of the eclipse was that it was bad news and you shouldn't do anything.
Hide away.
You literally, yeah, just hunker down, hide away, hope it goes away. And it will go away. But I'm now more interested in the thought process of like modern, like kind of baby occultists, baby witches, baby magicians who see an eclipse as like something that's happening in a heavenly body, and then feeling like there's something they can do around manifestation or something they can do around, you know, spirit communication, when most historical sources say don't do that. Like just don't. It's a bad time for doing magic.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not really sure what to say around eclipses. I do know that we stared at one last year for a while when we were in Florida.
Yeah, that was really cool.
It was cool.
We didn't do magic that night.
Yeah, we opted out. And yeah, magical things were happening that whole trip. So magical things happened leading up to and afterwards. Synchronicities with numbers, flights, visitations.
Yeah.
From entities.
Oh yeah.
It was a pretty wild season around the eclipse, but yeah, you and I did not do anything manifestation related. I did read later that the guidance is not to stare at eclipses too long. Magically, not that it would hurt your eyes.
Right. And you're talking about a lunar eclipse here. We weren't staring into the solar eclipse.
I didn't even consider that.
I know.
Don't stare into the solar eclipse too long.
For some reason, there are people who do stare into solar eclipses.
Let's not speak of it. Yeah, we are talking here lunar.
Yeah.
The moon. Yeah, I think less eclipses this year also will be helpful. But organizing your life and magic in accordance with the planets and seasons, I think has a lot of benefit.
Yeah, I think so. And I'm for always doing magic, and I can sometimes sympathize with the statement like we're always doing magic.
Everything is a spell.
I can get there if I think about it.
It can be useful sometimes.
I think, and I've said it before, so I won't belabor it. I think it's also just an excuse to not actually like do the work, but that's another thing, and that's fine. It's
only an excuse if you use it as such.
Yes.
And I'm not going to condemn a phrase or an idea because of how it's used necessarily.
Yeah, I guess. You know me.
Yeah.
You know I'm a stickler.
I mean, I wouldn't embroider it on a pillow. Why?
Maybe you would.
I probably would, and I'd make that pillow a talisman of some type.
But I am all for doing magic consistently. I just think that my magic, I know it shifted for me, and I know I really felt the change when I stopped looking at, oh, I should enchant for this or should do these workings at some point and then do them and then kind of wait for results. It then shifted to I'm doing like sigils or magic with more frequency. And then that shifted to, well, if I'm doing this with more frequency, great. But what are the days where I can really just capitalize on this? Like, what are the hyper favorable days? And maybe not do as many workings, not as many candle spells, not as many road openers, not as many whatever. And kind of restrict that flow of energy up into a point of a favorable time. And I'm thinking here too of like Austin Osman's Spare. He talks a lot about restriction of energy and storage instead of just like constant use of like
constant output.
Yeah.
I think that applies in many different fields. I actually just remembered, I was thinking about this the other day. I would like to learn more about energy use, because you were telling me a couple months ago about how you used to have a wood stove, and it was a lot harder to like have it kind of burn out and then bring it up and bring up the temperature of the house. A lot easier just to put a log on the fire every so often to keep the temperature where it was. And I was thinking I would like to kind of review my high school physics knowledge about like how energy is used and stored and saved. And I'm just really curious about that beyond thermodynamics. Like, how does that apply to me? How does it apply, like, as above, so below? Like, these things have these relationship and these symmetries. That's like hermetic knowledge, hermetic truth. So like all this knowledge feeds into how I can think about my magical practice.
It does
as well. And also, I really need to find a source on astronomy because I really am interested in that and I want to learn about that. Now I'm done.
Well, you mentioned the wood stove. I like that too because it's a synchronicity for me.
Really?
Yeah, because I've been thinking about the altar lately, and I point because it's literally right there.
Yes.
I've been thinking about the altar as that wood stove.
Me too.
And like the planetary prayers, which are said every day, are kind of like the morning log in the fire. We didn't. It's kind of like putting that every 24 hours there's this log that goes on the fire. But then there are certain days where there's like, I think of altar work as like the more you feed the altar, the more you work with it, the more plugged in the altar becomes. And you can use this in like two different ways. You could look at it like feeding a fireplace, or you could look at the altar as like, and this is kind of like sci-fi, but you could look at the altar as like a command terminal for the reality experience.
You know, the best thing and that combines both is Calcifer from Howl's Moving Castle.
Of course.
How Calcifer is a fire demon, something like
fire
that.
demon.
Was a star, became a fire demon. And then
that's I mean,
and then
it's angel stuff there.
Yeah, I would love, we should watch that as like from a magical perspective.
Yeah.
But Calcifer like can, through having enough fuel, can actually change the whole interior design of the castle and move the castle.
And that's kind of how I've been.
That's how we see our altar.
Right. And so you are plugging in like different things. And of course, there are different spells and different workings that are worked on different days. Yesterday and today seems to be like Wednesday, and Thursday seems to be like high point altar work.
Things are moving today.
And I mean, that's because, again, to come back to like, oh, well, this is our job. So much of our magical work, at least I would say maybe the majority of it for me, I don't know, but maybe that's probably not true if you count like dream journals and stuff. But the majority of my practical workings are for business oriented things. And so it makes sense that Wednesday and Thursday would then become the days where you have the most going on. There's hermetic petition, there's and I mean, I shouldn't say hermetic petition. There's petition to Hermes, Mercury, Jupiter, Fortuna is on Thursdays.
Luck.
Yeah.
All these things. Commerce.
Yeah.
Liminality, I think.
Yeah.
Thresholds. Yeah, I mean, there's a reason.
There's a reason.
We do like work with all the days. I think the day that you know what, I do find a couple more challenging than others. And what? One of them is Sunday and the other is Tuesday.
Yeah.
Mars Day, Sun.
Not me. Mars Day is like plugged in and going because I never.
I stay away. Dan has pretty intense creative energy at times.
I would say
huge vision. If
you look at like chart days where insightful things happened, it's generally a Tuesday for me.
Yeah, things to consider.
Yeah,
I may have lost track a little bit of what I was saying. We were talking about altar spaces, energy.
Yeah, we were talking about like, the workings we do being very reflective of our business.
Yeah, but you were talking about the magic you work just in general too. So you do stuff around the business and manifestation specifically, but you also do a lot of energetic work and work around not so much shadow, but like kind of self-empowerment.
Yeah.
And that's something that you and I think about
all the time.
Do a lot. And we insert that into like programs and SOA and Numinous.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think everything kind of does start with the internal person, like the centered person's vision.
Well, yeah, it helps to build something out of our own experience and something that we're continuing to practice and explore. And there are so many uses for magic. You and I have talked about this a fair amount beyond manifestation.
Oh, yeah.
Beyond bringing certain things into your life in a certain time scale. I was watching Midnight Gospel for the Damien Eccles episode on ceremonial magic. And he was talking about the different functions of magic. And I think in just that like episode or interview, he distinguished two ones, and one was on more manifestation and the other was on more like spiritual. I think he said exactly spiritual sustenance.
Okay.
I wrote it down. I like that phrase.
It's a good phrase.
Because we talked about in our mainstream magic lecture, the value of magic being beyond just manifestation.
Yes.
Beyond just bringing something into your life in a certain time scale. Yeah. It's bigger than that. It can connect you to the world. It can give you a greater sense of meaning. And that's something that many people who practice divination are aware of. Like divinatory materials are generally meaning-making materials. Right. And you can speak to that with your practice of tarot.
Yeah, definitely. There's a sense that sometimes tarot creates outcomes, or that because we divine it, we then have the ability to imagine it, which then makes it more likely to occur. It's the kind of question that's happening right now in New Thought, which is, are we creating visions of the future by thinking about them? Are we manifesting our futures because we're visioning them? Or are we visioning them because it's in some way precognitive and we know that that event is coming in our life? And so that when the event happens, we only receive visions of it because it happened.
Like we intentionally are precognitive?
No, like we're just all precognitive. Okay. And so when you, like, for example, as a child, I knew I wanted to be a magician, right? As a little kid, 6 years old, Dan wants to be a magician. Right. I only knew that as a 6-year-old because I'm a magician now. Because today I'm an occultist, I'm a practicing magician. Because of that, little psychic Dan in 1999 was able to figure out, like, was drawn to the practice of magic because 2023 Dan was a full-time occultist. That's like the conversation. Is it that, or is it 1999 Dan, he wanted to be an occultist, he wanted to be a magician, and because of that he manifested a career as a magician when he was, turning 30.
I see. That's really interesting.
It is.
6 in 1999. How cute.
Was I?
That's what you're saying.
Well, I'm not sure that I was. I just said 6 in
It's
1999.
right.
So it is, because
Yeah.
I was born in 93.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
Wow. Age.
Yeah, age happens.
Yeah. So
Yearly.
it's kind of like every moment.
Yeah.
So like flipping
Mm-hmm.
cause and result.
Yeah. And that's like a new thought conversation, but it's one that what you were
Chaos
talking
magic
about. Yes, it's a
conversation
chaos magic conversation.
too. So yeah, that's an interesting thing.
So when that, I think, shifts the way we think about manifestation. So when you're talking about doing magic for manifestation, suddenly
it's
like
weirder.
it's far weirder because
Okay.
is our perception of the past rearranging itself to support our present, or is our future
Yes.
something that we're drawing towards us?
Yes.
Yeah.
I do like both of them.
I like both quite a
and
bit.
I think there might be reason to flip between them, like between beliefs and perceptions.
Definitely. I think for the
depending on
chaos
what you're
magician,
doing.
yeah, I think for the chaos magician, like there's value there in doing past enchantment, which we actually spoke about on a podcast with Camp Nightmare.
We did.
There's value in doing past enchantment for better future results. And if you think about it in that way, that present affects past or future affects past, it gives you a little bit more of that belief component that's useful.
Yes. And listeners, if you're interested in exploring more about this, Peter Carroll writes on time a lot in his book,
Liber Kaos.
And past being shadow time as well as future, because it's something that's like, it's not the present, which is the only time which we can really interact.
And if you want to learn about chaos magic, there's the School of Occult Arts, where we've done quite a few different lecture pieces on chaos magic and chaos magic adjacent modalities. So
yeah, so talking about functions of magic, there are many, and you were talking about how you build your life, and manifestation and stuff for the business is a strong part of your magical practice. But I think you probably do a lot. Maybe a lot more than you realize. Is that possible?
Probably. I think we all do more than we generally think we do.
Yeah, depends on like how detailed your journal is, I guess.
Yeah. But I think there are, like, when we talk about doing magic specifically for like being an occultist or being a witch as your sole job, a lot of people, I think, believe somewhat erroneously that they'll be able to do that just by doing tarot readings or channeling or palmistry. I would argue that channeling is the one that's most likely to give you a supportive career just based purely on that one skill. Tarot readers, though, I think like the amount of readings you have to do is so much to actually make a living doing it, unless you're pricing it well.
Really high,
And you can only price well once you've kind of come to grip with a lot of other kind of subterranean pieces of the self. Like I found so much about my business work, and I would love to know if you'd feel the same way, but I found so much of my business work directly related to the internal personal magic that some could call spiritual sustenance. Like, who am I? What are my values? What do I believe my vision in life or my mission in life is? What is my true will? So much of that makes the business function better. And there's a question, of course, about like, well, isn't this just incredibly gauche and capitalist to be like, well, I'll fix my life so I can make more money? But that's not really what I'm saying. I'm just saying that once you're aware of who you are, and that is the magical journey, is the purification of the self and spirit, I think it becomes easier then to tell other people who you are.
Sorry, your use of purification of self and spirit again.
Yeah.
has almost caused me to cough. Yes. Yeah, I think that that's absolutely correct. And I'm still finding that to be useful in learning more about myself and uncovering those blockages and working through shadow. I do become more successful. I do end up making a little bit more money. But I think it's because, like, in part, because you're in right relation with yourself.
Yeah. And with the spirits around you, hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully it's all feeding into each other.
But we should like really get clear on that, the right relationship with the self. I think a lot of people right now are very aware of like, especially in witchcraft, like online spaces are very aware of the other and very aware of like there are people around us that we affect through our actions. But most of that is in like a very like consumerist mindset or justice oriented mindset of like consumerist in that like, oh, I should buy green products because otherwise, you know, the world is falling apart.
I was thinking about this looking at our toothpaste.
Yes.
Like, I prefer my soap and all my toiletries to have very strong political stances and religious beliefs.
Yeah, Dr. Bronner's toothpaste is a trip. If you ever read it, it is. I never thought I'd have a toothpaste that opens with telling me about Zoroaster instead of like toothpaste. It's quite an experience.
I unironically like it.
Oh no, it's great.
I think it's really fun.
So there's a consciousness about that, and there's consciousness about like the way maybe we benefit from institutional racism or institutional structures that are unjust.
For sure.
Yeah. But I don't think that's what quite you're talking about when we talk about being in right relationship with the self.
No, although that can be a big part of it.
It has cascade effects.
I think there's stuff underneath that as well, but it does all feed into each other. And it depends on what philosophical perspective you're working with. Like in college, I was a psychology major. And so I got to learn about the different kind of waves of psychology, the different movements of psychology, and the different philosophical underpinnings of all of them. Like behaviorism was a wild ride, and I'm glad that we've moved on from strict behaviorism and implications for child rearing. But we've moved into a more like holistic understanding of body mind and the power of your own thoughts. And thinking just internally there's a way of thinking where you just aren't in right relation with yourself.
What are some examples of that?
Treating yourself with respect or empowering the self. And honestly, it's very hard to change your thoughts. So I completely understand. Like, it might sound blasé. Just stop telling yourself you're inadequate. Stop telling yourself that you're, stupid. Stop degrading yourself. Honestly, it's very hard for a lot of us to let go of those narratives.
Oh, totally.
And sometimes it goes beyond just like, oh, fix your thoughts. Just fix your thoughts. It does. It goes beyond that. But they all feed into each other, and you need to do that. So it's internal, like right relation, but it's also like, how do I be in this world in a way that is in accordance with my values? How do I be like shows like The Good Place tackle ideas like that? But how do I live the best? Live what I want, but also be kind to the environment and people around me and my household and my animals.
And this is crucially not to live in a blameless, faultless state. Like, we're not arguing here for like a moral asceticism of like, you're going to be a saint or you're going to be the sinless figure.
Sinless is not
it's not the goal. Because it's not true. And I think there's also an element when we talk about like being in right relation with the self. It doesn't mean there's not going to be friction and that you don't run up against like someone else's experience or what have you. I think it does bleed out. Like, it really, earlier you said holistic as the word, and I think holistic is the right one. There's some pushback against like, okay, what is holistic,
True.
But even though it sounds cliche, that is really the case. Like, the business becomes inseparable from my own life because it is a part of me in a really foundational way. That doesn't mean it's my whole life, and that doesn't mean I can't move away from it at times. But I don't think of when I think of who Dan is, this is an outputting and a illustration of that that's tangibly and physically in the world.
Ooh, yeah, this is your greatest creative project.
I certainly hope so.
At
Yeah.
least thus far.
No, and I think like for you,
So you have a great intimacy and attachment with it.
it does, yeah. But it also, like, in the same way that like magical praxis informs this business, magical praxis also informs, you know, where we live, how we live, what we do within our home, what spirits of place we interface with regularly. Like,
Sure,
it does build out.
does.
And I don't know how much separating them is a useful construct. Like, so many people talk about like specifically business as like this thing that you fix or that you create by reading business books or working with business coaches or, you know, studying the way billionaires think. And then when you talk about fitness, we go to people who are like, you know, their whole lives are fitness, personal trainers, dietitians, whatever. And I think those things can, like, the expertise is distinct, but I think the way of talking about it is too narrow. And I think magic is kind of the antithesis of that. Like, magic is wide, where I think sometimes other things are like a more modernist approach to, like, say, marketing is way more mundane and is way more narrow. Marketing is we buy ads, we write copy, we create funnels, and it's all around the service of the business and more and growth. And those things can all be good. But I think magic then gets your mind into a space where you think like, well, what about enchanting for opportunity? What about glamour spells for my business, for me to be more presentable? What about, you know, these ritual workings to draw in not just energetic like cash, but to draw in the types of experiences I want within my life.
So magic is new technology.
Yeah.
Yeah. And not everyone believes in that technology or knows how to use it.
Right.
But yeah, you're talking about a more creative approach, a more broad approach, and one that speaks to the reality and the functionality and usefulness of magic.
Yeah. And one that speaks to the limitless nature of
that
the
we
person.
have to live with.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Limitless nature of the person.
Yeah. So in our work, when we've worked with clients one-on-one, and I think about this for Full-Time Witch specifically because so much of that is oriented around like business.
Sure.
The clients we've worked with, yes. And for those of you who don't know, that is literally a program we do where we work with someone for 3 months, weekly sessions, and help them reinvent their business magically, but also with mundane action too. So if you want to be that full-time tarot reader, how do we achieve that? And that's what Full-Time Witch allows us to do with our clients. But the reason I bring it up is because in those calls, one of the refrains that I've heard from every single client we've had has been, I didn't think I was able to do something like this. When we talk about presenting and showing up in a bigger way. And I don't just mean bigger in like that kind of like Instagram coach speak of like, show up in your biggest self, be big, folks. I mean,
just wear a lot of coats.
Yeah. I mean, we've had clients who have like said, I want to be doing this. I want to be performing at this level. And then you and I have said, well, what about the level beyond that? Like, what about up there? And there's this sense of, I never knew that I could even aspire to that level of thinking. I didn't know that I could realistically consider myself doing, you know, large scale tarot readings for famous people or having my own television show or whatever it is. Those conversations are the things that I think speak to that holistic sense of magic inspires our greatest self and inspires us to be as limitless in our perception of our own potential.
It asks you to be, I think, because if magic can help you achieve many things that seem unachievable,
yeah,
through mundane means, then you should utilize it. Shouldn't you dream bigger? Shouldn't you try it?
Well, exactly. Like that's the thing, that this as a magical technology, magic is amazing because it is, there's very little resource allocation necessary to do it. Even if you're talking about like the most complex ceremonial workings, it still isn't the cost of like a server farm or something. Like it's still not even a pricey coaching package with a, you know, magician or occultist or witch who also has experience in whatever you're working on. That technology is still not as pricey as some others.
Just had an idea.
Yeah, tell me.
It's a cursed idea.
Oh, no.
It started out not being cursed, but now it is cursed. I was just thinking like, oh, what are like actual business expenses? Because I've never thought of buying a server location. So I was thinking like, oh, like renting a place to work.
Yeah.
And then I was thinking, what if you had a magical, like you rented like a place to do magic only. And then I was thinking, what if you share that? And then I went to WeWork. So now it's cursed.
Yeah, now it's cursed.
So we're gonna take that a few steps back.
No, but I think
interesting idea.
That would be an amazing idea if there were enough.
Fun decor project for sure.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
And if there were enough magicians to make it worthwhile. Because I think one of the problems with like occult work as it stands right now is it's so solitary for most practitioners.
It is. I suppose working out in nature would be probably the best.
Probably.
The best place for it. Hopefully at a crossroads. So going back to I think you were talking about journaling before. And needing to catch up on a few things, either in this call or IRL.
All of the above.
I mean, honestly, you're often saying this, like in magical conversations that are public as well. Like journaling is super important. Keeping track of what's going on, keeping record, and also just for like working through stuff and reflecting with stuff. But one thing that's been on my mind that I'm excited about is Liber Curatoria.
Right.
Something we're bringing to the School of Occult Arts that kind of came fully formed from your mind.
Yeah, sure.
Like Athena was born of Zeus's head. And like I'm very excited to go along with that process, and I'm excited to really understand in an experiential way what it's like to work with. It's not the Book of Shadows that I've been doing my past couple of years. It's something separate, and it's something really unique.
I'm really excited about it too, because as we work through, like, Liber Curatoria is essentially based off of Jung's Red Book, Austin Osman Spare, and then material around contacting your HGA, Holy Guardian Angel, Holy Daemon, whatever you want to call it. It's a blend of all of those things. And I'm most excited about it because I love tarot as like a divination.
You do.
And I think tarot is really interesting and really cool, but it also has like some prime weak spots that I think people have collectively identified in the unconscious. Which is why there are so many tarot decks today. That's my kind of working theory for like why was there the Tarot de Marseille and everyone else doing divination with like a stack of 52 playing cards. And then all of a sudden we hit this point where the Rider-Smith Waite deck comes out. Illustrations by Pixie, Pamela Coleman Smith. And then there's this sudden explosion of Rider-Smith Waite tarot decks that don't have Rider-Smith Waite illustrations or even some of the cards. So you see this iteration of like the Cat tarot deck, the Lord of the Rings tarot deck, the Coffee tarot deck.
And the one I have, the Modern Witch.
The Modern Witches tarot. Like that. And some of those are very clearly just intellectual property, looking for new places to spend money.
Okay.
Like, oh, I'm a Star Wars fan, so I'm going to get a Star Wars tarot deck.
That exists?
I'm sure there's there's like a off-brand like Star Conflicts or something like that.
Star Conflicts, I like that.
I saw a Lord of the Rings one, and my immediate thought was like, why?
Oh, there's a Lord of the Rings.
There's a Lord of the Rings tarot. There's almost anything that you would, if you have an interest in it, there's a tarot deck. And
it does pique my interest as someone who, as a child, collected Lord of the Rings little cards that you get at used to get at the grocery store.
And some of them I think are very well done. And like the illustrations actually represent the meanings. But others, it's just like the High Priestess. Oh, we'll put Princess Leia on there because she's a girl. Like, it's not thought out very well. So,
well, I mean, when you're working with something so restrictive in that way, that's funny. For me, I've never been that interested in tarot. I've been way more interested in runes. So I've always but runes aren't pictures, they're letters. It's an alphabet. And there's no like, oh, what color is this associated with? Like, I mean, there are correspondences, but I can't look at it and see. So I'm kind of interested in exploring, like, what would it be like to delve more into the world of symbol beyond kind of the runic shape.
And it changes your divination. So like when we're divining with tarot, it's like future oriented, and it can tell you certain things about yourself. But tarot is really good at telling stories. And so there are endless stories that can be told. And you can, as a like starting out tarot reader, or even, you know, a very good tarot reader, you can kind of delude yourself into reading whatever you want out of them if you really have an outcome that you desire.
If you're kind of moved by forcing something, for I guess.
And maybe some of that too is like, does the tarot reflect back what we're thinking about? Like that becomes a question about like mind causation.
That's what we're talking about with manifestation.
Exactly. Like, are we pulling these cards because this is what's actually going to happen? Or are we pulling these cards because we want these things and the tarot is reflecting that back to us? That's why tarot cards can be so useful for manifestation. In fact, we have a series of tarot cards on the altar right now.
You can even see
all about what we're manifesting. However, in designing your own tarot deck, we are now getting, I think that's like the real solution to oracle-based systems as far as cardstock. Tarot, oracle cards, Lenormand, Tarot de Marseille, like they are all pieces of cardstock with symbols that mean things to most people. Archetypal imagery, the devil, the Wheel of Fortune, whatever. The Fool. We all kind of have our typical relationship with these things, mythic relationship. But the surrealists were like, wait a second, if this is about the person, if this is about the individual, then why are we using these cards like that have, why are we doing one card fits all? Why are we doing one deck fits every single person? Why aren't we doing every single person creates their own deck? And yes, we will see versions of these things. We will see, hierophants. We will see high priestesses. We will see justice.
Okay.
But they're going to be interpreted through that individual's personal symbolic language lens.
Okay. And so we can like bring through maybe stuff like childhood meaning. And
yes. Yeah, exactly.
Like for me, my favorite color is green. And I have learned that it is like associated with life, basically, and propagating life. And sometimes like the heart and love. And that's the global association. But for me, the association is also driving down the road outside of my childhood home and seeing the sunlight shining through the trees and having that like uplifting, joyous, connective experience of witnessing that and feeling that on your face.
Yeah, definitely. That would be something that you would put into a card in some way, or an oracle piece. So the way we arrive at these images and what we're studying in Liber Curatorio is ways to arrive at these subconscious images. sometimes that's through dreams. And for Jung, sometimes that was through dreams.
Mm-hmm.
But Jung also like just did straight up magical journeying. Like that was just a thing he did. And we're going to do the same. Like what happens when we get into a meditative state and have conversations with the unconscious? Do those characters, like Jung had Philemon, do those characters become entities on the different tarot cards who have meanings and messages for us? And so by the end of Liber Curatoria, we'll have a dream journal going, we'll have a journeying journal going, we'll have maybe art, maybe words, maybe correspondences, and all of that will be synthesized into a oracle system, which is then worked in communication with the holy guardian angel or the holy daemon or the highest possible self, whatever you want to call that. That entity communicates purely through those deeply internalized subconscious and conscious symbols. So it's a process.
That's wild. Like,
I'm really excited to see what happens with it, because the few times I've built my own oracle system, and they're not very good. Some of them are like literally scraps of paper with things written on them.
I mean, that's how it starts.
Yeah. The results have been pretty impressive. Like the divination is the tools, these divinatory cards that we come out of the process with are not going to be, I'm not going to say they're not useful for fortune telling, like take a chance, see what happens, but they're uniquely useful for conversing with the self.
Oh, that conversation.
Like, why do I do this all the time? Why do I think this way? Why is this a success? Why is this not? And like, as long as we're focusing the lens back on the self, the internal state, I think this is a profound tool for divination.
So you're basically decoding your own language, the language that you're already using.
Yeah, that you might not be consciously aware of. That's a very...
In symbol, which is hello.
That's our cat Hermes.
That's our little Hermes cat. I don't know why you're here. Go away. He's obedient. But my only concern is that I can't really draw very well.
Right. And some people will have beautiful, gorgeous images at the end.
I'll need to commission mine. I'll need my own Pamela. I'll need my own Pixie.
Well, I know some people who have experimented with using AI.
Oh my gosh.
Like putting in their dream prompts into AI and pulling out a card.
Cursed idea.
Yeah, I think that's a deeply cursed idea.
I mean, you could though. I mean, use the technology you have. Maybe.
I think get comfortable with your... No, I think get comfortable with your own symbol.
Learn how to draw.
No, get comfortable with your own drawings. Get comfortable with your own symbol.
I actually do like my like squiggles that aren't trying to be anything. I find them very aesthetically pleasing. There
you go. I mean, and that might be something. You might have one piece that looks very abstract and one piece that doesn't. Crucially,
they all look abstract even if they don't mean to be.
This isn't an art book. This is not an art book kind of construction. This is for the person. And so if they look like stick figures, or they look terrible, or they look like the best you could possibly do, then the narrative that we have, this self-correcting kind of like, oh, but these are all shit and I should throw them away, that narrative is probably going to be a card, right?
That's bad.
Like
that's a card.
That's a card in and of itself. Like internal judgment, I'm sure, will be highlighted by your feeling that you can't draw, you know?
It'll be me trying to draw a horse without looking at a reference.
Right.
Or that time that I tried to make an owl first.
Stop. Oh my God. Kat made a servitor that was an owl, and that thing, what was that? That was spooky.
I didn't look at it, and so I didn't remember. I'm sorry. Listen, I didn't look at any, I was just going, and I forgot that owls have very short beaks. So I made the beak very long and it looked like a plague mask.
It was spooky as hell.
On this but I loved it.
It was a very occult looking owl.
It, yeah.
It was like when you see pictures in the Middle Ages of people drawing cats with human faces. It was like that kind of an abomination.
Yeah.
But it was really like, that's something we have to talk about into the future.
My socks was better. Yeah. We've done a lot of like art projects, but yeah, you're right. And I do need to appreciate the way in which I approach my more abstract things.
Well,
maybe maybe it's just gonna be more abstract.
Right. I mean, I look at there's some very competent artists, and this is why I like the surrealist movement so much.
I love
is there are very competent artists who are also creating things that some people would be like, why? Like, what even is that? I'm thinking about that collection of images I have of sea serpents. That is,
you have a collection of sea serpent imagery.
It's over there in it's in a Wizard's Tale with the Loch Ness investigation.
Oh.
There's a collection of surrealist sea serpents, and they look like pen and paper drawings. Like, I don't think they look like photorealistic sea serpents, but that's not the point. It's about the essence.
What is a photorealistic sea serpent anyway?
Exactly. Something you get out of AI, something where you write like sea serpent and it shows you the most boring possible photorealistic, it's 1980s and it's a VHS version of a sea serpent. The coolest versions of sea serpents are like weird freeform surrealist things that you look at and you go like, I feel slime and primordial weirdness with this.
Wow.
But I don't like really know why. Like, what is this?
Wow. So that's a visceral like understanding of an image.
Right.
Too.
And that's like, we have visceral reactions to our own creation, whether or not they are, you know, Matisse paintings or, you know, Jackson Pollock. Like, there's something that's actually expressed by both of those, even though one has like a higher, I don't want to say a higher technical ability, because I think that modern art is actually quite technical, but there's a more base reflection of reality, we'll put it that way. And it's beautiful, and I'm not decrying it, but it just depicts reality in a different way.
Like Hilma af Klint, like it's very, it is abstract, but it's also telling the unseen nature of reality. And like some very difficult mathematical principles of how things move and interact.
I think it's why
physics, like she's brilliant.
I think it's why so many occultists take sometimes a very misguided step into poetry. It's because we all have to try, but because what are we trying to do? We're trying to express something that technical prose cannot.
Yes.
And that's like
multiple meanings as well.
Right. So that's the thing that I think like Liber Curatoria will hopefully do very well for the School of Occult Arts students.
Now my concerns are allayed and I am excited. I'm just completely across the board.
I think it'll be a good time. And I think that the realizations that people walk away with, that's almost what I'm most interested in. Like, it's a process. It's a dedicated ritual working that will take time. But I really want to know what happens when people get out of this mindset of, if I need to divine something, I have to use tarot, and I have to use a tarot deck that I bought from somewhere that's about like the thing I like, instead of just making the tarot deck for you, even if you quote unquote don't have any technical proficiency. Like, it's an artistic creation, so in some way I think it's very pure.
Oh my God, that word again.
Yeah.
It's very direct towards your subconscious and your language. Shared with you, yourself. And your past and your future. We've talked about a lot today.
We did. We covered a bunch of stuff. These are always going to be very sprawling. For those of you who enjoy a sprawling conversation,
that's how we interact with each other.
Yes, we invite you. Please join us with a cup of tea or something, a scone, something enjoyable. Big mug. And we're just going to have a chat. So this is never going to be a space that feels like preponderously planned, or that it's been, you know, horizontally integrated with the rest of the Eckhart's world. It really is just a space for us to talk about what's interesting to us and get these thoughts out into the world. I really do think that thoughts in the world matter, and thoughts in the world can just be spoken and then left to go on and do their thing. Like, maybe we'll revisit some of the things we talk about in Inner Sanctum, and you'll see something that comes out of it. Or maybe these will just be observations that Kat and I have that go out into the world and float around and affect people, hopefully.
Oh my gosh, in good ways.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so thanks for coming along the ride with us.
You can find out more about us on our website, theeckharts.com. We have a Substack which we release 3 times weekly that has written thoughts, much more coherently, I think, presented than in a conversation. But you know what? This is fun, and why should we do it if it's? Why shouldn't we do it if it's fun?
Why not?
Why not?
Why not? Shouldn't we?
Why? How?
Shouldn't we?
Have a great day, everyone.
How we not do?